always scary when you're like, is anyone actually going to come? So anyway, but I'm excited to speak on simplicity, not complexity. And then if you've read later, after they had the 7 keys, they talked about how just times have changed since they originally wrote those. And there's not only what they compared each of the 7 keys to, there's also now more like for each one a permissive, alternative, I guess. So chaos would be on the other side of that.
Man,
So
that's my favorite.
it's good. Anyway, before I get into it, just as I've had this on my mind, I've been thinking of each of you and just our organization. I want today, my hope is that we'll not only talk about like what we're doing as iFamily mentors, but just that each of you will leave with kind of renewed purpose and kind of buoyed up in your efforts, which I think Sarah did an awesome job. Because our time is super valuable and it's hard to come to these. And so, we only have 45 minutes, but I hope that I've just felt as I'm preparing this that probably any one of you could get up and teach and we could learn from each of you. So I hope you'll share a lot today and that we can all just be inspired in our efforts. All of us kind of understand the idea of simplicity, but it is to practice too. I want to share a little bit about myself and my story. Most of you know me, and a lot of you know my background, but I think it ties into what we're talking about today. So I was really blessed to be educated at home from the very beginning. And my mom and dad went and they heard some people speak who had decided they were going to try for a year to be completely self-sufficient. They bought like an old church house that they lived in, and they decided to try to have, a complete supply of food and everything they need for a year to completely be self-sufficient. And as part of that experiment, they thought, well, we need to see if we could teach our kids at home for a year. And this is when homeschool was like unheard of. But they did that, and after the year was up, they learned a lot about preparedness and all that, but they loved the time they had spent together as a family educating their children at home. And so they continued with it. And as my mom sat and listened to them, she just felt really impressed in her heart that was what our family needed to do. And I'm just so grateful for it because there were no catalogs of homeschool curriculums back then. There was, I can remember as a kid when I tell people that I did homeschool, they'd be like, what is school? Is that legal? Is that, what do you do? It was just unheard of. And she'd go to schools and ask for their old books or whatever. And there were a few curriculums that started to kind of like A Beckett and stuff, and she'd use those. But my mom had to simplify, and she had to start with simplicity. She had to, I think in some ways, it was better for her to go about it that way than when we get these catalogs of homeschool curriculums and we're like, oh, this is the answer. I know that if I spend $200 on this kid is going to love math, right? They are going to do it every day, and I won't, And she had to be like, okay, what works best? And how do I run a home and a school at the same time? And then also my mom had health problems the whole time. She had extreme fatigue and like fibromyalgia, chronic pain, a lot of stuff just all through the years. So her motto is just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and that's what she did every day. Every day we would have devotional, and then she tried to have us do our basic subjects. But that was her plan, and that was what she tried to do. And I really think she's pretty good at not beating herself up when she wasn't able to get to this or that or do everything. My parents' motto for our school was God, Family, Country. And those are my parents' 3 greatest. And they are so dedicated to all 3 of those, God, Family, Country. And everything else in our home fell into place with how we were working on our devotion to those 3 things. And so I'm so grateful for that. And anyway, I wanted to homeschool when, as I grew up, because I thought it was a great experience. I did go to public school and took some classes there when we moved from Utah to Arizona, and it was a good experience for me. I enjoyed it, but I also really saw the difference in how much time was wasted there, what was taught, and how it was taught without the viewpoint of God in everything. And so it was good for me, but it really definitely made me want to homeschool my children, and we have 12 kids, and we've homeschooled them from the beginning, and I'm glad that I have that many kids because I'm still learning. I feel like I've been learning a ton over the past couple of years, and I'm like, oh good, I still have 6 kids to practice on. So they're definitely my guinea pigs. My husband had known some homeschoolers that didn't give him the best impression of homeschooling in his family. And so he was kind of like opposed to homeschool when we started dating. But we watched a documentary together that I asked him to watch by David Barton, America's Godly Heritage. And in that video, he goes through these graphs of the year school prayer was removed from schools, and ACT scores go down, SAT scores, teen pregnancy goes up. It's amazing. Like, there is a big change in the year that prayer was outlawed from the schools. And he's always very sweet in his words. He's like, I realize that homeschool can create a pretty great product. So he became my greatest supporter, and I'm blessed for that. Okay, even though I've been homeschooled, I began my journey with all these, elaborate plans, and by then there was lots of curriculum. When we used to go to the homeschool group in Utah, that's now the big UHEA, it was like little roller skating parties when I was little with a few other homeschoolers. Sometimes I would lose sight of the fact that you've probably all heard this quote, and we love it, but that education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. And I sometimes definitely tried to fill the pail as much as I could. But luckily luckily there's a lot of good mentors for me that taught me the beauty of simplicity. So anyway, that's a little bit about me, and then we can discuss this together. I thought of bringing my family picture. I wanted to bring this because sometimes we look at other homeschool families, and in a picture we're all smiling, we're all dressed like that's an effort to have everybody's shoes and socks on, right? Belts for the boys. Like, weddings are fun, but anyway, we can look at this and be like, they have it all together, and what is our problem? And anyway, so I love my family, and I love this picture, but it doesn't always look picture perfect. And I love this picture that my daughter drew of me and gave me this note, because this is a little more how I feel most of the time. It's like this haggard. I just love it. I'm like, that was so. Anyway, but that's how we feel, right? And so it's vital that we embrace simplicity, not complexity, and also we want to try to avoid complete chaos, right? But I love the metaphor of the accompanist and how much they add, because you do add so much. So let's start with some thoughts from Thomas Jefferson Education about simplicity. On page 52, he explains, this is original. Keep it simple. You don't need a fancy curriculum, just the greatest works of all time, some hard work by you and your student, and lots of discussion and feedback on their work. So I want to start off with you guys' thoughts on, hopefully we kind of understand that at home, that we can do this simply. But what are your thoughts on iFamily Classroom? How do we avoid the public school, the things we want to avoid about a public school education, and not replicate that in our iFamily Classroom? Because we're not in a home when we're here, we're in a classroom. So what are your thoughts on keeping it simple and focusing on these things in iFamily Classroom? And you can kind of tell me the different age levels too, what you think that looks like. Mm-hmm.
Some of my favorite classes have always been the ones where you actually kind of get to know your teacher. So then you're not just learning
have a connection with the teacher, right? Is that what you're saying? I love that. Thank you for bringing that up. And I think at public school, most teachers want a connection with their students, but we have a benefit here because we really, like, our families do become close. And so thank you. That's a really great one. Other thoughts? Mm-hmm.
I have had classes where like 30 core kids wanted to be in my class and I didn't want to say no, so we did it. And I had a couple moms come in and help, and it was like intense. But it worked, and I think they were grateful. And it's a little bit hard because of how many kids are here and want to take classes. But then I've had other classes that I was really disappointed because only 7 kids signed up. And I really was hoping to have more. But those were my very favorite because we knew each other. 7 kids, and this last semester I had one with 8 kids, and that was my second one that not very many people signed up. Those were the very best. So just not being afraid of small classes. That's sometimes that small, intimate classroom is the very best. And it's okay, there will be other classes that have, 30 kids singing Spanish, and that's okay too. Because it worked and kids learned a lot of great little Spanish words, but it's okay. It's okay that there's the difference. There's room for both. Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that up. As you work on, and looking around, like all of you have mentored classes and stuff, so this is great. But there is benefit to both, and it really is something you do have to consider and be brave. We talked a lot about this at the last mentor training. I think it was the last one. Tracy talked about that in some of her math classes. She found, like, her Math Alive or whatever class, that she could have 12 students, and that was the exact right number. When she tried to let more in, like, it didn't work. And I've had the same experience as you. Tasey and I taught a science class, and it was 30-something kids, and there were benefits and there were drawbacks. We didn't get that one-on-one connection like Lacey's talking about here. Hopefully they all learned to love science.
Benjamin did.
Good. It was lots of fun.
So having had my kids mostly in public school a few years ago, in school it's all about structure, and they really teach for testing because that's where they get their money, and so kids don't really get to explore anything that they, like, if you are in class and the kids say, well, I want to learn more about that, the teacher's always like, we don't have time, we have to do this. And so it's great here because if kids ask questions, there's time to explore that and, focus on that one.
I love that. There's a lot in what he says right here. I don't know if it's the other one. Let me put this up while we're discussing. To achieve truly excellent education, keep it simple. Read, write, do projects, and discuss. The more complex our national curriculum has become, the less educated our society. George Wythe structured Jefferson's curriculum around these simple items: classics, discussion, projects, writing. Nearly the whole founding generation did the same, and the further we have moved from this simple formula, the worse our education has become. This is a simple word, projects, right? But that's what she's talking about. You can explore. And my favorite class ever to teach is nature study, and I've taught it for many, many years. And I start off with my plan. Like, this week we're going to learn about the sun. We're going to learn about bugs on this week, and trees and seeds and whatever. And I have certain things I'm hoping that they learn about those. But when we were sitting out in the field over here, we found last year monarch caterpillar. So I didn't have to be like, oh no, like, you have to know these facts about trees today. We have to get this done because you're getting a test this week on trees. We could set that aside, watch the caterpillar. I took it home. I took pictures when it hatched out. I wished it was hatching out on Wednesday, but it didn't. But and that's the difference, right? We could take the time when a little mouse ran out of a hole, or I think it was a vole, and ran past us, and all the kids were chasing it until it ran down its hole. That's what it's about, right? They're creating these connections with the world, and a lot of what Oliver DeMille mentioned too is exposure. Can increase their exposure to just so many different things. And then as they get older, they can decide if their learning takes, you know, a certain focus, but exposure to so many things, and so that's important. What else? I know there are other hands.
I just have several questions that are percolating.
Okay.
And one of them is, this is for small kids and big kids?
Yeah, they didn't tell me it was just for younger kids, but I guess it's
Oh,
a
okay.
scholar, so,
Yeah.
yeah. I think it applies to both, so.
It applies
It's
to
not
all.
limited to just the scholar, I guess, is the reason this is for both, so.
Okay.
And definitely though, with little children, we want to keep it simple. We don't want to overwhelm them, which I feel like is being done so much in public school. I mean, I hear parents all the time saying their kids are crying before the test day and they're, you know, so let me just give this little sidetrack, but my sister-in-law has been helping out in a kindergarten classroom. She's going to teach kindergarten next year. She taught before she raised her kids, and now she's going to go back to teaching. And she's telling me how much she loves it and how much fun it is. And she's like, there's this one little 5-year-old boy, and he's kind of the problem in there. She said they were practicing their song for the end of year concert, and he was not participating. She couldn't get him to like pay attention, stand up when he's supposed to, sing. And she went over to him, and he's like, now I'm gonna forget what it was. Oh, he said, the Mona Lisa wasn't even a real person that he painted. Was she? Did she exist? And she's like, is that why you're not singing? He's like, yeah, I just cannot stop thinking about it. and he's like she said, he'll be like, did you know that this planet, whatever? And she's like, but I think we're working with him. Like, we'll get him to you know, and be involved with what the class is doing. And I was like, no, don't make him sing the songs for your concert. Don't sit with him and read him a book about the painting of the Mona Lisa, you know? So that's our benefit, right? With these younger kids especially. With the older kids, there will be like a little more requirement or higher expectations, maybe, I guess is the best word. So, do you have other questions? You said you had.
Just sometimes when I think of my family classes, I think of all of this as the home stuff. And I think of my family's classes as more structured, but maybe I'm thinking of it wrong.
I think there's definitely maybe more structure depending on how people do it at their home. And I felt the same way as I'm preparing it. I was like, okay, how does this apply to iFamily? Because I think we really hopefully understand it with our homes. So that's really what I want to discuss today. But how many of you have taught classes where you realized that you didn't at first have like the simplicity, the right focus, and it takes a while? Do you guys have thoughts on that?
So as you're talking about this, I have realized I taught at Anna Green Gables class, and it was like a year ago, and there are girls that come up to me and ask me to teach that class again, and I'm realizing that class I read, we did projects, and we discussed. That was what that class was about, and these girls, I'm like, we already took Anna Green Gables, like, you know the story. I don't want to take that.
There's a lot of books in the series.
And I'm not even handed out to me, but it's like, that's kind of coming full circle to me, that really resonated with a lot of these students, and that's what I did. We read, we did projects, and we discussed. We didn't do a lot of writing because they were younger-ish, but we could have incorporated more writing. But how powerful that really is, and if I can just wrap my head around and keep it at that level of simplicity, because like I've seen that works. That class was my favorite to teach. The girls obviously loved it because they want me to do it again and again and again. But yeah, I think that is where the simplicity is, and that was just like a testament to me that
Yeah, it works. That's perfect. That's just what we're looking for. I want to keep this discussion going. I just want to add this to it. I have learned more and more to go about my ideas of what I'm going to teach in a semester with prayer. And also what my own strengths are and what I'm able to do that semester. There have been times where I've been able to teach a chemistry class and haul these totes every week, right, and have all the experiments set up. And last semester was not one of those for me. And we have taught a bunch of classes this semester, or maybe 2 before that, I don't know. not even sure I wanted to teach, but I always want to teach. But I was like, I don't know if I should. I got a little burned out. And so I kneeled down and prayed. And sometimes you pray and Heavenly Father just slowly puts ideas as you're preparing. But that time I stood up from praying with the idea of one of my classes and then later my second class. And the first class, and I just share these to kind of get your mind on this idea, is that the first class was that I should teach a class for my boys' age, a boys' class, and that I should let them each take a week and they thought about what they were interested in. So I gave them assignments. They needed to bring a snack and an activity, and they needed to do a presentation on whatever they were interested in. And I felt super excited about it. I told my boys about it, and they were excited. They started coming up with all the ideas and changing their ideas of what they would do each week. And then I started questioning myself, right? And I'm like, the parents are going to be like, you're not even teaching. Like, the boys are doing all the work, you know, or maybe they'll be bored of it, kind of being the same format every week, and all these, you know, different things came in my mind. But it actually turned out really good. And sometimes when I was there and they were trying to be the one in charge, I was kind of like, you know, like I would be planning more or whatever. I feel kind of, but I noticed some things, and that is that the boys started coming like each week more excited to this class. Whose week is it? What are we learning about? What are we doing? And they were super invested in it. And I think they learned a lot by being the one in charge. Sometimes they'd give their presentation, it was so hard for them to speak up, and the other boys really learned to like be supportive of them. And anyway, and then the second one was a class with a bunch of girls, and they each had a little buddy, and they taught a preschool each week. And again, I have the same thing, like the girls are going to be doing all the assignments, and I did have to do the work of reminding and setting up the schedule and having, you know, the resources there. But also there was just neat experiences with that, and I was lifted that semester of the burden of bringing everything every week and being in charge. So I would encourage you to definitely, number one, pray as you do this and think of your own strengths, your own personality, what season of life you're in. But then don't be afraid to have, you know, the kids in the class, they want to be involved, and they enjoy it almost a lot more than if you were just to bring everything for them every week. So anyway, other thoughts?
So Marshall was in that class, and you know he is getting better, but he won't stay in class, right? Because he was in other classes before. But so I was worried because he, you know, he was 5 going on 6, and he's a little. But anyways, he loved that class, and I was thinking about why does he love this class so much? Like, what is it about this class? Because he won't stay in any other classes. But he loved it. But I do think it's because it was like people bring new things every week, right? It was like a new perspective and a new, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was fun.
It was kind of magical, and I definitely think of him a lot with that, because the first couple of weeks he did, you know, he struggled to come in, but like he
does like
treats
treats
this
for that.
semester. They brought a treat each week, so. But
But
even with that, like, I've been trying to feed our family really healthy, so I told them, like, it has to be healthy treats every week, and they rose to the occasion.
But I was also thinking that really is kind of mentorship, is like kind of giving some boundaries and just giving it, right? I mean, that's really, to give that freedom is in a lot of ways what we are trying to do, right? It's to just kind of say, well, here's kind of the perimeters, but you take it and do what you want with it. And it's neat to see what they'll do, right?
I agree, thank you, yeah. Heather?
Well, 2 things I love about that is that you, by allowing them to explore what they are really interested in and share it with others, you're keeping that love of learning going, which is so important for kids to understand that they actually can love learning. And the second thing is that you are teaching them ownership in a small way, which is what we really want once they reach the scholar phase. And obviously we work on that in the scholar phase too, but just that idea that their education is their own and they are responsible, and obviously they get guidance from their parents and their mentors, but it's such a hard thing to teach especially when they're older and they should be doing it, if they don't, if they haven't already figured out how to do that, that your education is your own and you get out of it what you put into it. And, you know, all those things that we try and help them understand. Anyway, so yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
So what Heather said, and your class with the boys, when I was there too, one of the scholar skills that we want them to learn as they become practice scholars and kind of scholars and stuff is to be able to express themselves. And the first thing that they have to know is that what they have to say matters. And so allowing them opportunities to teach or participate in that way, like you did with the boys class, is a really key step with that, because they come and they're so excited when it's their day because they like that they're the focus and whatever, and so what they have to say does matter, and the boys love the class, and so then that feeds that knowledge that what they have to say does actually matter anyway. So it's had a lot of benefits having them participate in the teaching.
Jennifer was my sidekick. She was helping keep all the little guys that were with us in there happy. One thing I want to add too is love. I really believe that love can cure all the ills of the world, and it's so important as we teach, as we prepare our class proposals. Just love of these kids we're going to teach. So important. Are there other thoughts?
I just wanted to say it was interesting as I'm looking at this idea of simplicity, not complexity, and thinking about it in terms of core, but then also looking at it through, because it is one of the 7 keys, so looking at it through the entire ladder. And the idea, Heather, that you said about love of learning and realizing so much of what I want my kids to get out of education is a lifelong love of learning. I don't ever want them to actually leave the love of learning phase, even as scholars. And I think that the simplicity, that is such a key to them staying in love of learning, because they don't get overwhelmed. Like there's a sense of accomplishment and success that continues to build this feedback loop of, I love this and I can do this and this is exciting, and then I want to do this more and I want to learn more things and new things. And as they grow, the simplicity naturally becomes bigger than just primary colors. But even today, as an adult who loves to learn, if you throw me in the deep end of a new subject, forget it. You know, check out. I just feel like, nope, there's just too much. So even today, as a lifelong learner myself, I still need to start something in simplicity. Otherwise, I'll get burned out and I won't be able to pursue it and really get suck the marrow out of it. So I just think that it's such an important, a foundational stone.
Thank you so much. It really is. I love the word foundation. That love of learning is, and that is one of the main differences with homeschool and with iFamily than public school education. All the time, so I'm in different Facebook homeschool groups, and all the time I see moms asking questions, usually new homeschoolers, of, my child just hates this and I don't know how to get them through it. Or they'll ask questions like, can we skip the spelling words if we don't like it? And I'm like, yes. You are in charge. But that is a different mindset, right? Of, I'm a firm believer that any curriculum is a tool. And one of my little guys is finishing a math book probably this week, and I'm like, this is one of the first times we have ever finished a math book. And he's going out to dinner, but we don't. And I'm okay with that. Like, it's a tool, and we use it as we need, and we skip what does not work for our family, work for our child. And that doesn't mean that we never require things of them. My 12-year-old daughter took a English class from our neighbor. My 3 oldest kids at home took it, and my neighbor is just a wonderful teacher. She taught the IEW method, but it was a little above my 12-year-old. And so she did struggle, and there were times where I was like, you're gonna sit down, I'm like, we're gonna write this together. And I felt like that was okay, because every week when she went to this class, she came home like energized and happy, whether she had totally finished the assignment or not. And so it was okay to push her a little. So that, like, it does, we don't want to go all the way over here, right? Chaos and like, there's nothing. But it's so important.
So I think that's one of the beauties too of homeschooling is that, you know, there are certain things that we really do need to learn. Like kids do need to know how to add, like, when I'm teaching my kids to cook, I'm like, you need to know how to double this recipe. You need to know, you know, there are some things that we really do need. And that's one thing about public school that was really frustrating is that my kids would be like, do you know how long it took us to learn this in school? Like I just did one lesson, you know, in 15 minutes, or it took us a month to learn in school because of over there, you know. So these kids are learning in a way that is not only hopefully fun and gets them to learn more, but they're doing it in a space where they know that it's okay, that if they mess up, they're not worried about, like, I would say like pleasing the teacher. I mean, I think that they do that, but it seems like such much more of a safe environment where they know that they're loved, like we talked about. I think that most of the kids that go there really, I always see kids talking to adults and play and, you know, so it's just it's so much more of a safe environment and a place that really does nurture the learning process, as opposed to like cramming it down their throats and stuffing it up their noses. Like it's really more, it's just a safe place to learn, to grow. So
Thank you. That is the beauty of it. I was just listening to a podcast. They're explaining we don't take our little babies and be like, you are gonna learn to talk now. Like you're gonna learn. Here is how you're gonna learn it. You're gonna learn this word first. And we don't do that with them walking. We don't do that. They are natural learners, and if we do not stifle that, they will continue to learn. If they don't read till later, they've taken adults that are completely illiterate, and they can teach them to be reading on a college level in like, I don't know, it's very short time. This is how much I remember numbers, so anyway, but it was very short time, like a couple of months or something, like if they're super focused. So that's so important. Two of my favorite people are Greg and Rachel Denning. I listen to their podcast and I take their courses. And this is a quote from them. Too many people and students pursue academics at the expense of their mental, emotional, or relational development. They pursue book learning at the expense of living in and experiencing the world. They develop negative sleep or eating habits in the pursuit of good grades. But this has a cost on their life as a human being, not to mention their sense of purpose and fulfillment. So that's what we're striving for, is that education is part of our life. You know, it's not something you don't graduate from learning, you don't graduate from education. You are trying to find your purpose, your fulfillment, and like I said, I think my parents' focus of God as the main focus is so important, because then everything else falls into place. Okay, and I loved this quote: true education is between a child's soul and God. We're just trying to not get in the way of that, right? We're trying to facilitate that. Okay, so we still have a little while. Let's talk about, okay, what does simplicity look like to you as we're first putting together our class proposals? Let's kind of go through the process here. What would simplicity or the opposite look like in your mind? Mm-hmm.
Usually my favorite classes as a kid were the ones that would be like, we're gonna do cool thing number 1, we're gonna learn about cool thing, and AKA that just means we're gonna have a lot of fun. And that's just kind of, I don't know, those are the classes I always looked for, because like classes that were just kind of, you know, whatever willy-nilly were okay, but I was like, I could be outside right now. Like there's not really a point. Like I would still wanted to do something to still have fun, you know? Like it's like a balance.
Thank you for that perspective. So we need to value their time in our classroom, right? That we make it enjoyable, we make it fun, help them look forward to it. And I found that it's kind of, I've gone into classes where I kind of just dive in and we get into it and I didn't give them the time to kind of connect. That's actually kind of one of my weaknesses, to like try to jump into it too quick instead of creating that connection, so it's important. Did you raise your hand, Josie?
Oh, well, I was thinking something, so you read my mind.
Okay.
So I've only mentored one semester, and I really enjoyed it, that I taught English in Korea. And that was, the kids didn't speak English at all. Like, they were like 5-year-olds that didn't speak, and older kids, and anyways, and I think this applied here, is I felt like I would like toil into these elaborate lesson plans, and the kids are like, eh. But then sometimes I would have something so simple, and they loved it. And it's just so interesting how I really think it starts with connection. And I think even kids having fun in the classroom, you know, I have fun when I have friends. I have fun when I feel safe and when I can talk. And I think that's how the classes are, right? Is that whatever you do, whether it's group work or just like I did a sewing class, it was really fun because the girls, you know, you sew, you're talking and connecting. And then we did the engineering class, we would let the kids talk and group in groups. You know, you give them instructions and then they would do it. But I think that's really what makes something enjoyable, is like the connections and working together. And I think as a teacher, if I make it too complex, I get burned out, right? It's so much work already that since like biting off more than you can chew, right? Then you're like, oh, this is really more than I had anticipated. But, and also I think being flexible, right? Like you go into a class thinking, oh, it's gonna be like this, and then the abilities of the students matter, right? Someone's getting my sewing class, I thought we'd do more projects, but it just didn't, you know, we did less, and that was actually better, but I had to kind of go in and see what my students, right, meet them where they're at.
Yeah, perfect. One of my daughter's favorite classes was one of the very first semesters of iFamily. There was a lady who taught a knitting. It was just like knitting circle or something. And they would just sit in there and talk, and you know, she'd help them. It was so simple, and they loved it. They
But it's just like
created
the being,
friendships.
right, just the calmness and just doing something and talking and so.
Yeah. And then my husband, when he taught seminary to high school students, and part of his training, they said you need to at least every, I believe it was 15 minutes, change like the style of what you're teaching. Not, you know, if you've done kind of lecture or an active, then change it up so it's not always the same.
So I just spent 5 days on the coast with a friend who's actually just finished a teaching degree and just been teaching high school English. And we had a lot of time to talk, it was just the two of us. And so I was talking to her about her teaching and what she's going through. And so as far as like these mentor proposals as simplicity, she's talking about how she had to learn to write like a curriculum plan or like a lesson plan. And she was like, they had to be like 15 pages of like one lesson. And I was like, holy smokes, that's so detailed. There's no room for flexibility in that. So for me, as I see a mentor proposal, it's more like an outline of like, here's our subject, and like, hopefully we get to these things, and I don't know how we're gonna do it, but we will, and this is the goal. But her lesson plan, she was telling me, I was like, that is so monotonous, that's so horrible. Like, how, even as a teacher, would you be excited to teach
I
that?
was gonna say it's killing
Well,
my love.
And then you don't wanna lose something, because you spent so much
Yeah.
work making it.
Yeah.
No, I have to get this done because it's been all this time creating it.
And that's what she said.
And this is your flexibility.
Yeah, and then she's like, they have to be turned in, approved, and it was just, I was like, this sounds like a nightmare. I don't even know how you're excited to do this at all. But she's like, well, there's some flexibility, like we can choose how, but I'm like, well, how do you choose? And she's like, well, we're given books. And I'm like, okay, well, we're given books. But how are you flexible if it's so structured? So,
Yeah. Like getting more so, I think.
So I think from a mentor proposal perspective, it is really important that you have an incredibly clarified picture of what the goal of the class is.
Thank you.
Because if you don't know what the goal of the class is, then you just spend too much time running around in circles with projects and discussion and topics. But if you really know, if you really can distill your goal down into something that is simple and clarified, you can build a proposal around that goal, and you can see what's valuable and what's dross, what needs to get skimmed off because it's just fluff and it's not going to actually speak back to the goal. So having a simple and clear goal, I think, is a really important part of the mentor proposal process. And that doesn't always come in the beginning. Like I know for me, I'll think, oh, it'll be fun to do. I had a horrible class one time I taught NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month, and I didn't have a goal. Like I thought, oh, this will be fun. We'll do this, and together as a class, we'll invest ourselves and we'll write this novel during the first semester. But it didn't really clarify my goal for the class, and it just fell apart because I thought this would be a fun class, but I didn't really know what I was mentoring. I figured, oh, well, it's just obvious I'm mentoring writing, but
I thought
not so much.
I had the same experience. I thought we'll do a theme Dave Ramsey type class, so we'll just watch his videos, and they'll love that.
Yeah, right.
And then we'll do the whatever assignments, and it did not go so well. I never really saved that class. Hopefully they learned something.
So, I don't know, the thing, like when I teach in Young Women's, I'm an overplanner. I'm the kind of person that's like, okay, so your essay is 3 pages. I'm like, yes, but I have 7. And what do I do? So I've kind of had to learn, like when I'm teaching in Young Women's, to let the spirit talk instead of just me trying to fill this gap. Like if I am just filling this gap, it kind of like pushes the spirit out, so there's like not a space for it to speak to everyone, you know? I don't know. I think that's an interesting thing to think about when teaching, because when you plan everything down to the dot, you're not leaving the space for like that extra creativity, for that extra voice to be able to come in when it's really needed. I think it's needed in just about everything.
Yeah, and sometimes the natural process of learning is more discovery. I don't think it hurts to have extra material, so you do have a strength there. But that goes along with goals too, you know, and back to the nature study thing. If my main goal is that they memorize all the parts of a tree, right, that's going to be a different goal than my goal is to help them to realize that this world was created by God and it's beautiful and there's little things they've never noticed, how to observe, you know, the Charlotte Mason ideas of observing, you know, those are the goals that can help guide us. Heather, did you have your?
I have a tendency to overplan, which, I mean, that works well for me. Then I just don't do half of what I planned. But at least, so if we get going on something and we're really learning and enjoying, we just keep going. But if we try something and it just dies, then I have something else that I can do. So I guess my point was just, it's really good to hold your plan, to have a plan but hold it loosely, so that like when you found the caterpillar, you could explore that instead of, you know, having to feel like you needed to rigidly adhere to what you had planned.
Yeah, and I've found, this has saved me a lot that I've learned from mentoring a lot, is to have a few activities I bring each week or something. If we do end up with some extra minutes of like, what do we do, then I have that plan, because that can be hard when you haven't thought ahead on that and you're just, what do I do with these kids? They're running around the room. So, yeah. Nicole?
I have a few thoughts. I think obviously maybe you're like passionate about a subject, and I think different subjects lend themselves to different things. Like we were talking about keeping it simple, and you mentioned the knitting class, and that could probably you could just knit, right?
Right.
But then we talked about the class that you would need to change up with the seminary, right? Mm-hmm. And so just thinking about what your subject needs, and had more, because with knitting, you could just keep going. With my ballroom class, I loved mentoring this last semester for the first time. And with my ballroom class, I did teach a little by the seat of my pants kind of thing, which ended up working, I think, okay. I think people enjoyed the class, but I will say that I didn't realize how much the kids would enjoy the get to know you games and the line dances. Well, some of them did line dances, but most of them
ended up doing it at the dances I was at, and I was like, aren't you glad for this?
Yeah.
And now you know.
I'm just saying. I'm right.
wanted to get to know each other. And that, I think, was really more valuable to them maybe even than the dancing itself, although a lot of the kids really enjoyed the dancing too. But the third thing I wanted to mention is that I think that it is really good after you teach a class to find somebody you can talk to that is outside of the class. Your partner too, but like somebody outside of the class, like we're kind of doing here, and mention what you felt like worked and debrief, right? Like TJ is kind of deep, they mentioned debriefing somewhere in there with your kids, but I think debriefing your classes to somebody would be really valuable.
I've actually wanted to, every time I teach a class, be taking notes through the semester, which sometimes I've done that, but then after sit down and really like, how could I improve this if I teach it? It would be valuable if we had like a binder that everyone could look through for tips or something. Thank you. I feel like I've been really inconsistent. Like some of you have had great ideas and I don't write it down. Anyway,
We're taking
this.
We're owning our own education,
Take your
Tasha.
own notes. Don't copy me here.
Okay, so I do have a question. For when you teach like a younger class, there's like gonna be the occasion where there's a kid that their parent made them join the class, or they showed up and thought it was just gonna be one that they could just play around in, but then you actually want to, focus on what you've prepared a little bit, and some kids actually do want to learn the stuff, etc., etc. What's the best course of action to figure out what to do with the kid that just wants to cause chaos no matter what you do?
So it's a huge challenge, and I'll come right here. Prayer and love first. Okay. Pray.
That's what I was hoping.
Pray about what to do and come at it from love. And I've said this in other trainings that I have one child, or maybe more, but for sure one, that has been a challenge in many classes. And I'm so thankful to mentors who have allowed he or she. And they have enriched his life or hers. I'm grateful for that. But that doesn't mean that if they are disrupting the whole class, that you need to, obviously something has to be done and changed. And then I think also making their parent aware of it. I'm always so disappointed when I hear later that my kid was really disruptive and I never knew about it. I really want to know about it. So.
That's what I was gonna say. The answer is God. He'll have him because every kid's different. Every kid's different. And I do think the love thing too, sometimes we have to pray, ask God to give us a portion of his love for those children. Because sometimes it's hard for us to find it on our own. But if he can give us a portion of his love for that child, and then every situation is different. There have been situations where a student came to me, I knew the class was disruptive, and I kept saying, okay guys, I need you to be quiet. But then the student came and said, these are my friends, and I don't want them to not like me because I want to study. Is there anything you can do? Like hearing that the student that was part of the discussion group didn't want the discussion group happening. That was really helpful for me, and so I just said, we're going to change it up. You guys don't get to sit by each other anymore. And that was perfect for that class. And every class is going to be different. So, and also talking to parents and saying, like, how can I reach your child? Because besides God, the parent's the one that knows the child best. So God and their parent can give you a lot of insight.
I was just learning the hard way. Core love of learning, like you can't give them outside of class homework and expect much. So thinking about your age that you're addressing, I would say anything under the scholar phase, it has to be hands-on. It can't be like, well, you follow the spirit, right? But for the classes that I was doing, it was like I couldn't expect any outside work. I couldn't expect everyone to understand what I was doing on the same level. Like there were so many different levels. And so to make it, I think just making it joyful, love
love of learning, right? And remembering that that was the phase that I was teaching, is how do I just help them to love learning and have realistic expectations.
Thank you. I wish we could discuss that a little longer because that's actually really important, Jennifer. And then we need to.
I love what you said about the expectation thing, especially with the younger classes, and something that I found the most important thing is to let go of that expectation, because you can create assignments that could be helpful to them, and some of them will run with it and some won't. And as long as you're not expecting a result from that, but it's something that maybe can bless their family if they want it to, then I think it can be helpful to, like, you shouldn't be afraid to give assignments, but give them with the idea that this could bless you the end. Like, you don't care if they come back with it or not, but.
That even applies in the scholar classes. Like when I taught chemistry, they really needed to read the chapter every week. It didn't always happen, right? And so then we were kind of, so I quickly had to adjust, like, we're gonna cover a lot of this more in class than what I expected you to be doing at home, because home is the number one priority, so we don't wanna be taking away from what they're doing at home. But some kids will be like, I'm gonna go home and I wanna write a report on this, or whatever. And anyway.
I do have one last question.
Okay.
Is it a good or a bad or just like a mediocre idea to have like rewards for like certain things? Be like, oh, if you do like this little extra tidbit and you can get like a piece of candy next time you come to class. Like, I don't know, it's always nice, but sometimes it does cause problems, whereas some kid does like something and gets a piece of candy, and some kid does like the smallest little piece and gets a piece of candy too.
There's several considerations with it, and it kind of depends on the ages and what your goals are. So again, it would come down to like being clear with your goals, your subject. Sometimes extrinsic reward will ruin their experience. Like, they had kids who were all coloring and then we gave half the kids a reward for it, and those kids would color a lot less in this classroom because they were expecting the reward instead of just doing it for the joy of that. But there are also times where a reward will help them to do something they wouldn't have normally done, but then they can find the joy in it, and then they do it for the intrinsic reward of it. So yeah, case by case basis, I think. Thank you guys so much. I wish we could discuss a lot longer. I'm so glad whenever we can get together. You're an amazing group of women, and we're just so blessed to have this community. So hopefully some of those things are helpful, and we're gonna end now.